We're going to be talking about a really great topic today, sexuality and relationships, something everybody cares about. But because our culture is slightly confused on what it means when you talk about sexuality, I want to tell you something right up front. Sexuality is not merely one act. It is who we are, male and female, and this morning we're going to spend some time just taking a look at that very thing, going back to Genesis, because I don't want you to be uncomfortable with the information I'm giving you today. God has such an amazing plan for you, and He has such an amazing plan for your life, your love story, your future children, the legacy you're going to leave behind, and I have the privilege of sharing some of that information with you today. So I'm really glad you're with me. First thing I want to remind you, though, is because God is the great King of the universe, we want to focus on Him for just a moment. I want you to have a profound understanding that God is the King of the universe, that He created everything, that we bow our knee and say, wow, you're King, I'm not. And because we do that as a king, we can be sure when He sits on His throne and administers His kingdom, that it will go well for us. We can actually go to this king and say, how is this stuff supposed to work? Make it work for me, please. And I guarantee you He already has a plan because God has already written a story. It's called history or His story, and you're included. He's already mapped out how you can have great relationships, how you can have purpose and meaning in your own life, and understand, why did God make me a woman, for instance? I'm a girl. I like being a girl. But He made me female on purpose. And He made you male or female on purpose as well. So God is the King of the universe, and just as a reminder, if you look in the New Testament, you'll see that Jesus talked about His Father and said, in my Father's house, there are many rooms, but He also called it the kingdom of heaven, and my Father's kingdom, because Jesus understood that. We want to join Him and remember that God is King. Now, because He's the Creator, we want to take a look at how He created us, and we're going to go back to the very, very beginning. I'm going to start in Genesis. You don't have to worry. I'm not going to spend too much time in the very beginning, but we're going to go right back to the beginning where it says this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It goes on to say that the earth was formless and void, which means it was useless. I don't know how you're feeling today. Sometimes I feel like, gee, my life doesn't seem quite as great as it could be. Anytime God speaks into a place that is formless and void, even if your history is not good, let's say in the area of sexuality and relationships, you might be listening to me today and you thought, you know what, when anybody talks about this stuff, I just start feeling bad because I already feel guilty. Listen, at the very beginning, God spoke into a place that was formless and void and seemingly useless, and He created the most beautiful environment we've ever seen. How do I know that? Because when God spoke, He said this. It says in verse 3, then God said, let there be light. Now let's go back to verse 2 for a moment. When the earth was formless and void, darkness was over the surface of the deep. And I love this part. It's like a movie. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface. And then God said, what did He say? Let there be light. And guess what showed up? Light. That's right. Because God in His nature has everything He calls out. He is light. He said, let there be light, and there was light. And He continues on in chapter 1 of Genesis. We have the whole story here of God saying, let there be this, let there be that, and He spoke it into being. And I want you to remember that He spoke things into being and gave them dignity and gave them purpose. Not only does He do that with us, but you're going to see you actually have that ability yourself. It's an amazing thing God has given us. So after He creates the environment and He creates the animals and He has the plants and the trees, the shrubs, the moon, the stars, all of creation, something happens that's really quite amazing. In verse 26 of chapter 1, it says this: let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Now, what is going on here is there's this big stop. All of creation pauses, and God says, now, the centerpiece of my creation, the apex of my created order is what I'm about to do next. That's why it says, let us. Instead of God said, God said, God said, it's a pause. Now, let us make man in our image. Do you know that the human person is the only being in the created order with an essence linked to God's image? We're it. When He said, let us make man, He was serious. And when He says, let us, it's Father, Son, Holy Spirit. 3 in 1, a communion of persons. This is the first picture of a healthy relationship. This is unity and wholeness at its best. This is the first place we want to look when we decide, hey, how do I want my relationships to work?